Okay, we're back after Morten's blue screen of death. I haven't seen one of those for a while, but obviously they still happen. If you missed it, we've got the introductions in the other short video. But we just discussed, and it's probably best that Morten jumps into some of the code he was going to demo. But before that, I actually asked you a question, which was... why? So obviously, you're kind of known for refactoring the APIs now, but why did the APIs or the services or the old kind of APIs need refactoring in the first place? What was kind of the decision behind that?
Well, there was a lot of stuff that needed to be cleaned up because the old, what we usually refer to as the document API. Yep. It was kind of trying to do too much, and there was a lot of stuff where it was going directly to the database. So like when you were iterating over properties or saving properties, it was going directly to the database. So there was no database transactions or no ability to roll back or anything.
Okay.
So it was there was a lot of things that needed to be cleaned up. And as far as I remember, there was also a bunch of stuff that was relying directly on an HTTP context, where we could actually improve it and say all the stuff that only deals with the database doesn't need to be in a web context.
Okay.
So it's easier both for us as the core to test, but also kind of start allowing people to test their own code.
Very, very nice. Okay. So you've got a couple of demos or kind of scenarios that you kind of want to step through today. So I'll switch over to your screen and we'll take a look.
Yep, and that's mainly because I got a question about the service APIs and when to use what from a guy called Dan, who was asking about. Well, he's primarily a front-end developer.
Okay.
And not particularly familiar with what we have of APIs and what's legacy and what's the new APIs and when to use service APIs and when to use .NET membership stuff.
Okay. Yep.
And there was a question about using the current user in the back office.
Okay, so the current user who's logged in to the back office?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, with regards to the first thing about what's legacy and what's new, I think the easiest thing to do is kind of check the namespace of what you're using, because all of the new stuff is in umbraco.core.
Okay. Yep.
So if you're using Visual Studio and go to the references and double-click the umbraco.core assembly,
yep.
Then you can actually browse it, and then you'll see here at the bottom we have services, and then we have all of the different services that we have available. They're listed here.
Okay. Yep.
And if we click something like member service, you'll see all of the methods that are available and what they take. So whenever there's no documentation on this is kind of a good place to go and check out what's available.
Okay. So just kind of browse the methods that are available inside the namespace of the DLL.
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of get an idea of what's actually available to use.
Yep.
And it's hopefully something that's fairly easy to do and browse around.
Of course.
But then the other part of it was like the differences between the members part and the users part. Mm-hmm. Because they seem fairly familiar, and I think that's probably because they are both based on the standard .NET membership providers under the hood. So a lot of the stuff that you find in these two services are very similar. Mm-hmm. But of course, the user service, that's for the back office users, the ones who log into the back office and can create content and all of this. Whereas the members is on the front end. If you want to create a section on the front end which is closed off by password or login, you need to log in to gain access to a specific service. Then it's the members that you wanna deal with.
Okay. But do both services have very kind of similar methods available, or is there kind of one that's available more than on the other, or are they very, very similar?
Well, I think we've kind of focused on the member service because that's that's primarily what people use.
Yep.
Because using the member section in Umbraco is still fairly popular for people who want to create a section that needs some kind of password protection. Yep. Because it's fairly easy to get up and running using it. So so that's a bit our primary focus. So you'll probably find a lot more available in the member service than in the user service.
Okay.
Because the user service is primarily something that we've used within Umbraco in the back office.
Okay, fine.
But I've tried to just do a quick example here of getting a user's email by getting a user by email or getting a member by email. So what we have here is the user service. We can get an iUser object from that. And similarly, from the member service, we can get an iMember from there. So these are like the two different ones.
Okay.
If you go directly to the services. But I think
so. Obviously, the user service, obviously with version 7, kind of users are kind of created, or the login is created kind of with an email. But in the kind of the previous days or the old days, obviously you could specify like a username. Is there a method on the user service to kind of get by login name or kind of username, if that makes sense?
Yes, I mean we have.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
By username, by email, and you can also use this to create it. So if you want to create a back office user from code, and you can also use this service.
Very, very nice. So what was the example that Dan was after trying to do? Just literally get a user in the code?
Yeah, so I think what it was after was so something like this, where maybe you have a dashboard.
Okay.
And maybe you want to show something specific for a user, or just say, "Hey Warren, thanks for logging into my dashboard."
Yeah.
Whatever. So what you can do is, and this is where we get into kind of the helpers part of dealing with either users or members. You can use this web security class, which is available for use if you use something like this. Umbraco user control, if you're doing a user control.
Is that inherited in kind of most namespaces in terms of like Surface controllers?
Yeah, exactly.
So API controllers.
Yeah, it's it's in. As far as I remember, it's not in Surface controllers. And
oh no, sorry, because Surface controllers wouldn't make sense because obviously it's designed for the public-facing site.
Yeah,
but yes,
exactly.
API.
So it's in the Umbraco authorized API controller and in the Umbraco API controller.
Yeah.
So if you do something that's specifically for the back office, this is the type of controller you would use. Or if you're using something like for Web API, you can use the Umbraco API controller.
Okay. Yeah.
But in this, you can see it's also available here. But the basic thing is that on this web security class, you have current user available, so that you can start using it. It's also available on the Umbraco context. So if you're not inheriting from any of these, then you can you'll almost always have the Umbraco context available when using Umbraco. So you can also get that security context from there and do the same thing.
Okay, so the line below is doing the exact same thing as the line above.
Yeah. So these two are doing exactly the same thing. This is just a shorthand for this.
Yep.
Basically. So the differences is so if this was a user control for on the front end, and you wanted to get a member, check if a member is logged in, then you would use this members helper, a membership helper.
Okay.
It's called, which is also widely available, and you get current member.
So behind the scenes, that helper is checking for things like is a member logged in? If it's not, then return null or return an empty string or return an empty member object or something along those lines.
Yeah, exactly. So it's so this is actually the membership helper is using the actual .NET membership providers under the hood. So whenever you do something to log in, for example, then it's doing all of the boring stuff for you, like validating the password and finding the member, and then setting that forms authentication cookie, which you probably done manually in the old days when dealing with membership. So all of that stuff it's doing for you. So I have an example here. Like if you have this membership helper, all you do is just log in and then pass it the username and password, and it does the rest for you.
So I presume that kind of that if statement, or that so if that method returns false, then there was obviously a problem. Login user in, and then obviously you add in an error, invalid login to the model state. But if it's valid, then you're just redirecting them to some URL.
Yeah, exactly.
So looking in that example, sorry, just to go back, is there any reason why the log out function is using native forms authentication.signout? Is there any reason that there isn't a members.logout in the kind of the members helper?
No, I think that's this is actually the sample code from the session I did at Code Garden, and I think it's an old habit because it is
it's actually there
available here.
Okay.
So it should actually be this for consistency. It should just be this.
Fantastic. Okay. Yeah. So working with members and the users is obviously very, very easy then, with kind of these available services and kind of helpers that are available to do kind of the most hard work, or the donkey work for us, as so to speak, doing a lot of the validation, checking if the password's correct, and all that kind of stuff. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. So I tried. I know it's a bit corny, but I tried to outline it here. So it just when to use what. Umbraco wants to help you on the front end, so look for helpers, the helper classes for the membership helper, and I think a lot of people are probably familiar with the Umbraco helper.
Yep.
Which it's quite convenient to use. So when working on the front end, that's what you want to look.
So when you're talking like in views and things like that, work with the helpers. If you're working in controllers or maybe more C# code, then you're most likely going to be using the service APIs. Yeah.
So if you can't find help, ask for service.
Very, very nice.
Sorry, that was the best I could come up with. Yeah, but I think another important part is that almost all of these helpers work with cached items, because when we work on the front end, we want it to perform and be efficient. So we want cached items. So like when we use the membership helper, it's actually fetching that member from cache. Whereas if you use the membership service here, it's going directly to the database.
Okay. Yeah.
There is some caching on it, but it's not the same type of caching as you have on the front end. So it's something that's not as efficient for using multiple times.
Okay. So the service stuff is really for like CRUD operations in terms of creating, or like you've put in your comment there, creating, modifying, or deleting use the services as opposed to using a helper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you need to create something, and we usually say that you probably shouldn't use it for querying on the front end, because it's not very efficient in that area. So the only places where it's convenient to use the services for querying or looking up stuff is usually in controllers, like if you need specific properties on content maybe, or a document type, or if you're doing something with events, like you need to update some media items, or you need to update a member, use properties from the member, then the services are convenient to use. Yep. But generally, you want to use the helpers on the front end.
So do the helpers live in the same place that you showed us where the services live, in umbraco.core.helpers?
No, they don't. They actually live in the umbraco.web context, which is So that's the assembly called Umbraco.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's legacy. So unfortunately, we haven't been able to change it to Umbraco.web yet. But when you browse it, you can see that there is a Umbraco.web namespace.
Yep.
And so the ones that I've showed you so far, they are in the security namespace. So Umbraco.web.security. You have the membership helper for members.
Yep.
And then the web security one for users.
Okay. Cool.
But you usually get them through either the controllers that you're using, or through something like the Umbraco context or the application context.
Okay. Yeah.
And so so the last point here was that the services has no context of what's going on around them, which means that it doesn't know anything about a current user or current page or anything like that. That kind of context is not available in the services.
Okay.
So that's also something to consider when you're thinking about whether to use the membership service or to use the membership helper.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that kind of covers the example that Dan was obviously wanting some help on. I know that there was another example that someone else had kind of asked you earlier in the week or last week that you wanted to kind of cover or touch on.
Yeah. So there was just trying to pick out a few of the ones that I find interesting, because it covers something that's not widely covered, I think. There was a guy asking about the membership service. He was using some kind of Elasticsearch and wanted to index the member properties whenever they changed. So like when you update, or when a user updates his profile, he wants to make sure that it's indexed. This could just as well be an examine that you're indexing something.
Yeah. Okay.
So what he wanted to do was find out which properties were changed. And then he had one minor problem, which was that every time a member logs in, the last login date is updated, which is a property on the members.
So that's a built-in property on the member, built into Umbraco. So every time they log in, that last login date property on the member automatically gets updated.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
then, obviously, this event would then fire because the member service is then saving the last login date, and obviously he didn't want that to run, I presume, every time they logged in. Yeah,
exactly. So it was causing his indexing to run every time someone logged in. So without no properties were changed except for this last login date, which of course wasn't very interesting for his indexing. So he wanted to make sure that he only indexed properties that are actually changed. So I tried to quickly outline what you can do in this type of situation, where you want to check if a property has actually changed before you react to it, whether it's indexing or something else. So what we have is we are subscribing to both the saving and saved event. And this just to illustrate the differences, because we can, in the saving event, this is before it's actually saved. So what we can check for is if the member has actually been saved once before. If it has no identity, then we know that it's a brand new member. So maybe you want to do something differently in terms of indexing. You can do it here. Otherwise, if we know the member already exists, we can check if it's been changed. So first we cast it to the I can be dirty.
So what is that class doing if you cast it? If you cast that member to I can be dirty, what is it doing behind the scenes?
So what's it doing is that it's more or less all the models that we have in the core for something like a member or content or content type for that matter, is tracking all properties that we have available on the model, and so we know when it's been changed, and you can use that in your code as well. So if you want to react to whenever a content editor has updated something in the back office, then you can iterate through and see if it's actually been changed. or if it's from code as well. So we can see first if the member object itself is changed, because then if it's changed, then it will return true for is30.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then we can iterate through all of the properties on the member and check if each property is 30.
Yep.
And then we just save that as a list.
And then you're just checking that you have more than one items that is, or properties on that member that has been changed or is dirty.
Yeah, just to account for if the last login date is always part of the collection, and we just want to check if there are actually more than one property that's changed.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, we can always adjust this. Maybe check if it's only a specific last login date that's been changed.
Yeah.
But then we can iterate all the properties and get the values of them. And
okay. So then, so you could then get you could then get any other properties that have been changed on that member, and then pass that to the Elasticsearch or the re-indexing of examine or whatever that you need to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
If they're not for some reason.
And so, I mean, since this is the saving event, so that means that the member has not actually been saved yet. So if we are in another situation where we want to adjust some of the values, we could simply update the value here and say something like value equals something, yeah. And then that's all we have to do, since it's in the process of being saved.
Okay, so obviously it's not probably a good example, but you obviously, in this instance, we could set every property where it was previously changed. You can then just set it back to an empty string.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, you can do a lot of things here. So it's
down to your imagination.
Yeah, really. And so the other approach was that if you're doing it in the saved event, so after it's actually been saved.
Yep.
So what in this situation it's a bit different, because we reset dirty properties. So after saved, the model that's returned here in this event is a clean model. So if you just look at is dirty, then you'll get false on all of it, because it's just been saved. So
there's nothing been changed since the last time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what we can instead do is use this interface called I remember being dirty.
Who comes up with these names?
I don't know. I guess it's between me and Shannon.
Fair enough.
Clever names. But it makes a lot of sense.
No, it does. So it's basically saying that it was dirty the previous time before it was saved. Is that what it's trying to do?
Yeah. So exactly. So if you looked at the properties that were changed here, so like the properties that's in this collection before it's saving, will be the same properties which are in this collection here after it's been saved.
Okay.
Because it can't tell you what the property was before, but it can tell you that it's been changed. So let's say if one of the properties was changed from, let's just say it's the name that was changed from Warren to Warren.
Yep.
So it might seem like it's been changed, but it's not really, because it's the same value. So we actually check for that. So if it was just kind of saved as the same value, then it wasn't dirty. We don't consider it dirty.
Okay, so if the value is exactly the same when it gets saved, even though it might have been modified, you don't consider it dirty. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So like when you're saving through the back office, then we will always iterate through all of the properties and set them on the object before we save it. So that might be the same value that's actually been saved again, but we want to know if it's actually been changed.
Yeah, no, makes perfect sense. So we have just two different variations here in this example. So it's cast into being I remember being dirty, and then obviously you got the extension method on the property is dirty.
Yep.
Cool. So is the if at the very beginning the same as well? Is new entity, is that the same in saved and save in? Is it?
No, yeah,
So,
that's a good point. No, it's not. So this is one that we've recently added.
yep.
I can't remember exactly in which version, but it's a convenient extension method to use to check if the model that you're saving, whether it's a member or a content item or a media item, is new. Then you simply use this because it's in the new API. It might be a bit verbose or cumbersome to actually check it yourself manually, whether it's new, because after it's been saved, we don't really know how many times before that it was saved. So let's say you want to do something only if it's a new item.
Yep.
Like you want to append something to it. Maybe you have your own custom property that you want to update for your editors, and you only want to do this once. You can use this new entity extension method for that type of approach.
Yeah, no, that's very nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so that's the two examples that you kind of wanted to touch on. And is there any more examples that you want to kind of go through, or kind of make us aware that maybe people are not aware of, that these helpers or kind of services or any kind of methods that are available to us that are in these services that maybe we're maybe not as aware as?
No, I think that the main ones that I wanted to touch upon, at least for the helpers' perspective, was these just the distinction between using the web security class and using the membership helper class.
Okay. So just to go over the points again, so web security is for a helper for the users of the back office, and the membership helper is for kind of front end membership or authentication on my site that I implement.
Yeah.
Neat.
Yeah. I mean, if there's time, I have one more example, but it's...
Yeah, no, we've got we're actually got time for a change. Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so one other thing I had was this also using an event. So this is using the media service event. And so I got a question once about changing the file name of a media file or an image when it's uploaded. So there's this guy asking if every time he's uploading an image, he wants to change the name to the ID of the media item that's being saved, because he wants to ensure that every time he uploads a new image, that is actually overriding the old image. So like if I had an image called koala, and on the same media item in the back office I uploaded one called penguin, then
you'd have two files in that folder.
Yeah, exactly. For the media item it would be changed, but you would still have this koala file messing about in your file system.
Okay. No.
So what he wanted to do was just to rename the file when it's uploaded.
No, it makes sense. And obviously, yeah, like he says, ensures that that file is always kind of updated.
Yeah. I mean, of course, it's not so nice to have a picture called 1234, but
no. But
if that's the scenario, then that's fine. So I can quickly go through this and see that. So what I'm doing here is I'm using our file system provider, which is right now only usable really for the media or media items. So everything that's saved within your media folder in the root of your Umbraco site.
Yep.
You can use this file system provider, which gives you access to some methods that is kind of an abstraction of the file system. So if you had your site on Azure, for example, and you want to save all of your media in blob storage and not in the file system, then you would create a different file system provider, which takes this blob storage into account.
Okay.
And so it's always when you need to do something with media files, then it's always a good idea to use this provider, because then you're ensured that, I mean, at least if you're creating a package and you want support across, then it's a good idea to use something like this, because then you have support for people who are using stuff like blob storage.
Okay. Yeah.
But either way, what we're doing is iterating the media items which are saved, or which are in the process of being saved.
So there could be more than one that's being saved then?
Yep.
Okay.
Usually it's just one if you're working with the back office, but I think the idea was that we could have a bulk save operation at one point,
Okay.
where there might be more. But so what we're doing here is just grabbing the property of the Umbraco file, which is by convention, there's always the upload field, and then just getting the value of that, which is the path to the file.
Yep.
So kind of like this.
Yep.
And then we use the file system provider to get the full path and the relative path, which we're going to use down here.
Mm-hmm.
And the relative path we use for the thumbnails, which are generated by default.
Yep.
So if we look down here, maybe I'll wait with that. Yeah, just the thumbnails. So this is actually a method on the file system provider, which gets all of the thumbnails for you, which we then iterate, and then for each of them, we do this. Go to this method.
Yep.
And just kind of chop it up, I guess, because we have. So this is just very basically removing the thumb part or the big thumb part of the file name.
Yep.
So that we're back to kind of having the raw file name. So like we're uploading a media item called koala.jpg.
Yep.
And that's what we want to rename. So we want to keep this part of it.
Okay. Yeah.
So
you're just figuring out what part of the file name from the thumbnail. So it could be koala_thumb.jpg and koala_big-thumb.jpg, and obviously you just want the part that's just koala.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So it's using this method both for thumbnails and the actual picture that's been uploaded. So that's why we check if it is a thumbnail, then we kind of chop this away. If it's not, then we just continue and then just grab the actual name of the file, and then we can read from it, and then we use the file system helper to open the file and then add a new one with the new name.
Mm-hmm.
So what this is doing is just reading the file and creating a new one, so kind of similar to a copy operation.
Okay, so it's just kind of opening it and then kind of, in theory, just kind of overwriting it and just saving it back down.
Yeah, and this is simply to use the methods that are available on the file system helper.
Right. Okay.
If you're using like a regular system I/O from the base class library, then you would just use something like rename.
Yeah. Okay.
But at this point, there wasn't a rename file available here, but we'll probably add like a shorthand for something like this.
Okay.
So you could just call file system.rename.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Much nicer than having to do this. And so we just return the new path.
Yep.
Which we have here, and then so we update our property to the new path, which would then be media/123 and then /123.jpg.
Yep.
And then we can go ahead and delete the file.
Okay.
The old file. And one thing to notice, so you probably see that I don't have anything specific to the thumbnails here, but that's actually in this method in our file system provider.
Okay, so if it finds anything with koala and koala_fum.jpg and koala_fum-big, then it'll delete all of those at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. So you can see when I hover over here, it tells me that I can pass in the path and set a boolean for delete thumbnails.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm just passing it the path to the koala JPEG and then tell it to delete thumbnails as well.
Yeah, cool. And so this file system, current one, so this media file system, this only works with a kind of flat file system, or are you saying it currently works with Azure Blob Storage currently?
No, so when I mean out of the box with the Umbraco, it only works with the file system.
Okay. So if I wanted to make it work with Azure Blob Storage, I would have to create an implementation of media file system that implements the same methods, delete file, things like that. That works with Azure Blob Storage. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There is actually a guy who's created one. I can't remember his name. I think it's Dirk something.
Okay.
I don't remember it, but he has a package on our which actually adds support for blob storage. So there is actually a package available for it, and I think was it Ali from no, I can't remember the company name. The guy who works with Andy Butland.
Okay. Yep.
I think he created one for AWS.
Yes.
For Amazon as well.
Okay.
I think it's been a long time since I looked at it.
Yeah. No. That's fine. That's fine.
But I'm pretty sure there's those two available. And so what you would do is simply go to this config file for the file system provider. Yeah. And then tell it to use something else.
Okay, so if I'd created my own Azure Blob Storage file provider, but obviously, like you said, there's already a package, but if I wanted to create one that works with some obscure other cloud storage, then I could create one and then update this config here to say, anytime working with the media section, to use my provider. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Very, very nice. I can hear the bells ringing in the background. Maybe that's time to take a few minutes.
To go to church? No, it's 3 o'clock. Yeah, it's 3 o'clock here, so that's why.
Okay, cool. Maybe we can take a couple of questions.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm having to refer back to a couple of questions on the original stream. Okay, so Jeroen Brewer asks, I heard something like standard values isn't currently possible because some things work different in version 7. Will a package like standard values be possible in the future? Do you know what he's referring to?
Answers, yes and yes.
Maybe we could elaborate on that.
Yeah. Okay. So.
So why wouldn't it work currently then?
Well, it won't work currently because of the way. Well, in version 7 it won't work because of the way that new content is created in the back office. So when you go to the back office and then create a new content item, it just opens up the editor, and then you can give it a name, and then you can fill in your properties and then save it. Yep. In version 4 and version 6, what it actually did was when you click create new content item, it opened up a dialog, and then you gave it a name, and then it actually created it in the database, and then opened it up in the editor.
So yeah, the workflow is obviously a little bit slightly different, so hence why that doesn't make sense. Okay, yep.
So it's a lot faster to create new content in version 7, but it also means that we had before an event called creating, or no, it wasn't creating, but I think in version 6 it's called creating.
Okay.
So before it actually becomes available in the content editor, you had an event that you could subscribe to, and then insert some values, and then when it popped up in the editor, then those values would be present.
Okay.
And for the second part of it, I know that Shannon has been looking into how we can create a similar event, but something that works much nicer in version 7.
Okay.
So probably something around maybe Angular or Web API or something where you can hook into and add something to it before it becomes available in the editor.
Okay, so it's been thought about, and Shannon or you guys are kind of considering an option on how to possibly do this.
Yeah, I think Shannon has some ideas on how to solve it. But if it's AngularJS, then I don't know anything.
If it's C#, then you know everything.
Yes.
Yep.
Almost.
Awesome. Almost. Fantastic. So the next question comes from Sharon Steed, and they ask, I'd like to know if the team are planning to provide any working examples for all the methods contained within the new APIs. The documentation is sparse and is usually down to Googling or experimentation to find out how to use them properly. Obviously, this is a topic that comes up time and time again. Any feedback, comments you want to add?
Well, yeah. Now I don't have anything open, but so if you go to the documentation section on our and there are no examples available, then if you don't get scared by the Umbraco source code,
yep.
then I would suggest that you download it from GitHub and then take a look at the test project.
The test project.
Yeah, Umbraco.tests. There's a project called, and there are actually quite a few methods that are handled in there or covered in the tests, which actually provide an example of how to use different methods.
Okay, so that'd be a good kind of way to kind of skim the code base in terms of I want to understand how to use this method, or I want to understand how to use this service API. It's best to kind of try and browse the test source code for the time being until kind of more official docs or something is typed up at some point.
Yeah. I mean, we'd always love to add more documentation, but
of course, it's always an ongoing problem. You got to
especially something like code examples is something that's very time consuming to do.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I tried to add some code examples to the content service, which is the one that's the most used, I think.
So yeah, most popular one probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, very nice. So that's already on the documentation, you're saying? For the content service?
Yeah. There should be some examples there.
Okay. Cool. Very, very nice. That's it for questions, because that was the only couple of questions on the old feed, and I'm just double checking that we got none on this new feed. No, that seems about it. So thanks for talking, Morten. It's a shame that I can't see your face anymore, and just your screen. Yep. I'm sure your webcam's just gonna blue screen if you change it back. No, thanks for taking the time to sit and chat with me this afternoon. It's been a good afternoon in terms of learning how to use the APIs.
Yep, cool.
And just on a side note, I'm on holiday for the next couple of weeks, so expect you hangouts end of August to be back on. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch up with you soon. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.